Good morning. Man, I love Eastside Church of Christ. I hope you do too. Because this is a place where, of course, it's not perfect. There's no such congregation on this earth because church is full of humans and we have our mistakes. But by and large, this is a place where you can come and be loved, a place where you can come and be fed, a place where you can come and be accepted wherever you are, and a place where you can grow, a place where you can learn. A place where Jesus is Lord and the Bible is honored and lifted up as the inspired word of God and taught. It's just a lot of great folks here. And so I just want to remind us of that. Hopefully we already know it, and just say don't keep it a secret. Because look at it here. We got room for more. So let's bring them. Let's tell. Let's invite and invite and invite. And so especially if you're here as a guest, if you're here maybe just passing through, or you're here from town checking it out, we're just thrilled that you're here. And if you can, stick around. If you could, stay a few minutes so we can have opportunity to thank you for being here, to invite you to come back and to get to know you, introduce ourselves. And the rest of us, take 5. All right? And so just glad you guys are here. A couple of things have been mentioned, and then a couple other things for our youth, our teens. This evening, we're going to be meeting outside for Elevate tonight. And so dress appropriately, and we're going to play kickball, or as we like to call it, argument ball. If you don't know why, just come and see. But we'll be cooking out hot dogs as well, having a good time. So in all of our teens, and invite others, and let's have a good time out there tonight. And then I think it's 6, right? The grown-ups are all in here, and continue with the great things that they're doing together in here. As already mentioned, I think Unity Night is coming up a week from this evening. So next Sunday night, we're hosting other congregations, and so help to sign up for the snacks. If you could, there's a sign-up sheet out there, and then just be a part of that and invite anybody you know from anywhere else that you want to come be a part of that. Let's just fill this up, man, and raise the roof. Praise the Lord. And then, of course, a couple days after that, a Halloween night or trunk or treat, as we already mentioned. Already got a lot of candy. If you got any more you want to bring, come be a part of that. Come have a car and a trunk out here. We're going to go along this wall and then curve around that way. If you're one of those cars, want you to come early and get set up so that we can be ready to go well before 6:30. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be crazy. But it's a way to reach out to the community, so be a part of it. And so a lot going on. I started last Sunday talking about this verse and this idea. In 1 Kings 6:31, and we're defining what this means, fully devoted. And this is where Solomon, when he was dedicating the temple, all throughout 1 Kings chapter 8. And you should read that. It is an amazing prayer, just so profound and so beautifully stated, and there's so much in there principle-wise that we could learn from that. But here in verse 61, he says this, to them and us. He says, but our hearts, insert yourself into this verse. It's kind of a theme verse for us. Our hearts must be fully committed. Man, that's 100%. That's all the way. That's all in. Committed to the Lord our God. And what does that mean? He kind of defines what he's talking about really in the second half, where he says to live by his decrees and to obey his commands at this time. So we're talking about being fully devoted. And last Sunday, these two parts, the first half of how I define that, it means an unequaled sacrifice, where there's some sacrifice, there's going to be something required of me. And it may not always be convenient, may not always be easy, may not always be accepted or agreed with by society or friends or family or other people around. Jesus told us, you want to be my disciples, right? It was just read, pick up a cross, your cross. Deny yourself and follow me. Oh, that sounds kind of extreme, kind of harsh, kind of sacrificial. Yeah. You want to know about sacrifice? Read about Jesus. He will show you what sacrifice looked like. And it's got to be an unrivaled selection, a choice, an act of will, a decision made. I choose him before and above everything and everyone else. And it's got to be unrivaled, where Jesus sits alone as the king of your life and your heart, and there is no competition. There is no rival for number one in your life, and everything and everyone else falls below that somewhere in our priorities, in our heart and commitments. Well, that's only half of the list, so let's get the other two today, because we're talking about total devotion. Not a partial, like a, well, I'm interested in God. Because remember, Jesus was always having people say, hey, we want to be one of your guys. We want to kind of be in your club, Jesus. We want to be part of the Jesus club. So where do we sign up? And we pay, $20 a year, and we fill out an online application, and then we just occasionally do some stuff, and there's a few meetings and blah, blah, and we just kind of phone it in. And Jesus was pretty clear, wasn't he? Read Luke 9, among other places. He was like, oh no, you want to follow me? Here's what you got to do and be and believe. And wow, it was not always easy. But it was very clear as to who your first and most and best and priority. Remember the guy that said, hey, what's the biggest commandment? Love God more and better and before and above anything and anyone else. Love others as yourself, number 2. And so we're going to get our third part of our definition. You should write these down. I'll have the whole list at the end, all 4. But the third thing it is to be totally devoted involves this, an unending service. The Bible talks about serving. Jesus gives us again the template. He gives us kind of like the definition. What does it mean to be a really true servant? Well, just as always, look at Jesus. He will show you what that looks like, how that acts out. And so we follow that lead. Romans 12, Paul writes this, never lacking in zeal, keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. So our service, first and most, above all, belongs to God. Our service goes this way, as our worship does. We're serving God. Sometimes we'll serve God by serving each other. Sometimes we'll serve God by serving the lost or people out in the community. And I love the fact, one of the things that's so cool about Eastside, by the way, is so much of this happens. And it's usually behind the scenes and below the radar. It's not done for applause. As Jesus would talk about how the Pharisees, they would make sure and do their service out in public for the express motive of everybody seeing it and going, ooh, look how spiritual you are, wow. And they could buff their little halos and glory in themselves. And God said, that's, well, your applause of man, that's all you get, because God's not impressed. But we do it for the Lord because we're serving the Lord and to help, and because that's what servants do. That's what the heart of Jesus is. And as his followers, those named after him, Christians, we follow his lead and take his nature as much as we can as ours and do what he tells us. And so we're serving the Lord as well as each other. You know, in John 13, remember, he washed the disciples' feet and said, okay, I've given you an example, so as I've done to you, you go do somebody else. Give yourself away. It's an unending service. The Bible talks a lot about this service. For example, at the end of 1 Corinthians 15, Paul ends that chapter by saying therefore, his conclusion statement, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, be rock solid. Don't give in, give up. He said, let nothing move you. We're like spiritual mountains just firmly planted. And the winds of culture and the storms of social media and public opinion and blah, 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 blah don't move us. Stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always giving yourselves fully to the work of the Lord. Why? Because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. There are a lot of labors that are in vain. There are a lot of things that we do in this world that, maybe have a temporary value or none at all, really, when it really comes to it. It's just stuff to do. But not the work of the Lord, not the things we do on his behalf for his glory and to the service and the edification and the help of somebody else, whether it's in the church or outside. That's not in vain. It matters. It makes a difference. And how many of us, when it really push comes to shove, you know what we really want to do? We want to do something that matters. We want to make a difference. That makes a difference. It may not get the applause of the world out there. But really, so what? When it really comes down to it. Would you rather have the applause of social media, ooh, you're so great, or the applause of God? One matters and one doesn't. Here's something that's unusual. I don't know if you've ever read this text in Exodus 21. We've got a song that we sing, pierce my ear, O Lord my God. Take me to your door this day. It comes from this text. Because in the Old Covenant, this is like one chapter after he's given the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20. He talks about slavery. We don't like to even talk about the word slavery. It's got a bad connotation because of a bad history and so many evils associated. But there is a spiritual slavery that's appropriate. It's actually biblical. It's not the same as historical, the terrible evil of slavery that we know from people owning other people and all the terrible things associated with that. So make that distinction, keep that clear. But slavery was a reality back then, all through different histories and cultures and countries, from almost the beginning. Doesn't make it okay and right the way people were treated, but slavery was a reality. And he talked about if you had a slave, and there were occasions where sometimes a slave would come to be treated well and had a good owner and a good master when they served, whether it was economic slavery, as a lot of it was, to pay off debts or something else. But they would come to fall in love with the family that they worked for. And maybe they're taking care of the children, and the children grew up with them, and they were the nanny or the caretakers, or just a lot of possibilities. And he makes, the law of Moses made accommodation for an instance where that they might fall in love with this and say, you know what, there comes a point where your debt's paid, you could go on, but they're like, I don't really want to. You guys are family to me now. We've been good to each other, and we've come to be friends and love one another and become like family. And you might have an instance where a slave would say, but I don't want to go. Then to make this, and he says, here's what you do then. And he says, and it's strange sounding to me. It's like, wait, what? Because the Bible will have some of those things. Some of these practices or some of these things you're like, that's kind of weird looking to my ears and eyes, but okay, and this is what they said to do. If that's the case, and you wanted to make this situation permanent, what the slave would be called a permanent servant in the house, you take him to the doorpost, the frame of the front door of the house, and you would take an awl, like a sharp little stick or like a thorn, something real kind of has a sharp point to it. They maybe use them to sew with, and you would drive that awl through the earlobe into the doorpost. Okay, sounds painful to me, because I know a lot of people have gotten pierced ears. Everybody does that now. My son lives in Oregon, and man, there's dudes with more pierced ears and ponytails than the girls up there. I think it's okay, but it's a thing. And but I've never done that just because I'm scared of needles, and I'm a big scaredy cat when it comes to that kind of thing. I'm like, I'll pass, thank you. But I know that's pretty common. But here it had a profound significance. Here it has deep meaning. He says the masters bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door, or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. So we don't have that in our culture or our New Testament covenant law, of course, but the principle is sound. There comes a point, if you want to serve your Lord permanently, that's what the song is about, pierce my ear. They don't literally pierce our ear. But when a slave would go through this, or a servant would go through this little ceremony, then they would have a mark on them. They would have an indicator, outward indicator, that everybody that saw that from then on would know what the deal is. You are a permanent servant to those folks right there that you serve. And you could tell then after that, couldn't you? You could see there was an outward mark. This principle begs this question of us. Who can tell? Who can see? Who knows that you belong to our King, our God, you serve him, that you have fallen in love with Jesus and you have given your heart wholly and completely to him, and you said, take me, mark me, make it permanent, make it forever. So much so that people around you can tell. It's not an ear piercing now, but what is it? Would it be your words, your lifestyle, and the way you live it, the choices you make, your priorities? See, when people are fully devoted to Jesus, you can tell. You cannot keep it a secret. Whatever you are fully devoted to, it's obvious. No matter what it is, whatever's number one in your heart, whatever's number one among all the priorities that we all have, whatever's at the top, people can see that if they hang around you for a while. You can't keep it a secret. You wouldn't want to. It's the most important thing to you. So the question is, what or who is that? Can people see? I heard this story a long time ago where these guys, remember back this must have been a long, long time ago when they would have elevator in big skyscrapers in cities. They would have a guy that worked in the elevator, and he would work the elevator for you. What floor do you need, sir? And this must have been a long, long time ago. And this guy would ride the elevator every day up to his and then back down several times a day, and they got to know each other, and they were kind of friends for years and years. Well, this guy was a member of the church, the one riding the elevator, and they were having a gospel meeting, tells you how long ago it was, and a gospel meeting, and they were saying, you need to invite people, and he finally realized, my friend in the elevator, man, I need to invite him. And because I've never invited him to church before. So he gathers his courage, and he's nervous, and he's so excited. So finally he's like, so Fred, hey, we're having this thing at my church, and you should come, man. And and he just stumbles through his invitation, worried about he's going to get some backlash or some problem, like we always think that we're going to get. And well, the guy goes, tell me more about it. And they start talking, and finally the guy says, the guy in the elevator says, what church do you go to? And he says, I go to blah, 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 Church of Christ. And the guy says, what? I'm a member of the Church of Christ too. Little did they know, they both were members of the church, different congregations, and all these years they'd been talking and friends. Neither one of them had invited the other. Neither one of them talked about their faith. Neither one of them had a clue. They're both already members of the church. And because sometimes we want to kind of, out in the world, out at work, we kind of tamp that down. We put a cover over, we put a bowl over our light, right, to kind of dim that down so we can fit in and not cause a stir or get somebody mad or whatever it is. But an element of that is that they refuse to quit. They keep going. Another element of somebody that's fully devoted, and it's going to be a servant, is they're invested in other people. They pour their lives into other folks. It's not all just about me. It involves me. It helps me. It grows me. It just, so great for me. But it's not just about me. It's through me to beyond me to others. Jesus tells this story, Matthew 25. This is part of a longer sample of a longer text. And he talks about that day, the judgment day at the end, what's going to happen. There's a separation between the sheep and the goats, the saved and the unsaved and all of that. And then he tells this to distinguish between the two. And he says, on that day, at the end, the king will say to those on his right, because those are the ones that he has been, you guys to the right are going to go to heaven, you to the left, And he says to those on the right, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now look what he tells these guys. These are the ones going to heaven. For I was hungry. And this is Jesus telling them. I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. And they're going, what? I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in, Jesus tells them. Naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Now they have the same question I guess I would. Jesus, question? And they're going, when in the world? Because they said, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you and thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick and in prison and come to you? And look at this answer. Here's what he'll say. Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. So at least in this text, look at his criteria for how he separates those that they've invested and they've helped and they've served and they've given themselves away to the lives of other people. If we're going to be fully committed, we not only be committed to Jesus, we're going to be committed to other people, because Jesus said that's part of what it means to be mine, to serve me, to be fully devoted to me. You'll be my hands to serve and give to other people. We got to give ourselves away. And so it's not just a life, it's an adventure, right? And it's not just a job, it's a life that is an adventure. It's a ride, man. It's discipleship, and Jesus is awesome. But it's a life of doing, a life that moves, a life that gives, of giving, action, loving, learning, leading. It's like we'll see after a while. We're going to see the example here in a couple weeks of the book of Acts. We see the church, a devoted church, and what a devoted church. See, here maybe we're looking kind of individually so much. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about a devoted church. What does that church look like? What does it do? And Acts gives us such a great example of that. It's a life that doesn't quit. You know, when there's sometimes in some places it's easy to be a Christian, it's easy to be devoted. I love God at camp, you know, or here, and that's awesome, and we need that. But sometimes it's really hard, and on a college campus, when there are a lot of people like, you believe what? That's stupid. Why would you? And or at work, or at some places out in the community or online. What about when it's when believing becomes doing, as James will talk about, and James 1 and other places, when knowing becomes lifestyle. That's when we're putting it into action, putting it into motion. See, full commitment doesn't just happen here. If you just believe, well, even the demons believe, yeah, and you know, it's got to be translated into how you live, how you think, what your values are, the way you speak and spend and treat other people, and so on. Philippians 3, Paul says, not that I have already obtained it. See, because who of us have got this all figured out? Who among us have already got this nailed down just right? Nobody. We're all on the same road at different mile markers of working toward becoming more and more this way. But maybe none of us are fully devoted, but we could be more so in that. That's that journey of growth and discipleship, maturing, as it talks about. And so if you're not there yet, welcome. Neither and none of the rest of us, but we want to get closer to it. Okay, we keep learning, we keep growing, we keep studying, we keep worshiping, we keep stretching, we keep being challenged, we keep working at it. He says, I press on. I keep going. I will not quit. Why? In order that I may lay hold of that which I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. There is a reward. And then lastly, our final thing is fully devoted means there's an unlimited submission. A man who is sitting in prison, a man who is enchained for the gospel, because of the gospel. He wasn't a criminal, but he was treated like a criminal, and he's sitting in prison, or a type of prison, kind of a house arrest possibly, wrote that while in prison. Look what he said from jail. I eagerly expect and hope that I will no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage. So now that as always, Christ will be exalted. That's lifted up and magnified. In my body, whether by life or by death. He's like, if it's by the way I live or by the way I die, so be it. Let Christ be lifted up. Maybe it about Jesus, because why? Here's the truth. For me, Paul says, here's what life is. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. For the fully devoted, Life is all boiled, what life is, what it constitutes, and what it means is all boiled down to one word: Jesus. Now, of course, our lives are complicated and busy, and we have, what do we do? We got work and school and friends and family and hobbies and and bills to pay. And of course, all of that comes farther down the list under the umbrella of the most and the biggest and the best, Jesus. For the fully devoted, Jesus isn't a cuss word. Jesus is life. He's the air I breathe. He defines what life is. It doesn't say to live includes Jesus. He doesn't water it down and say life is about Jesus. It has Jesus in it. On Sundays for an hour or so. No, look at this. That's fully devoted. Life is Jesus. People want to know, what is the meaning of life? Paul will tell you right there in 4 words what the meaning of life is. Sums the whole thing up. Answers the question. For us, his people, right there, live as Jesus. Wow. So what would Jesus do is not just something you put on a bracelet. It's how we decide stuff. It's how we define what our thing is, how we're going to live. Wow. Now see, people are like, whoa. When you start talking about that, we might have a tendency to inwardly, we're kind of going, now hold on a minute a second. That's kind of, dude, if I said, what would Jesus do, and I'm in this situation, that means I'm going to have to, or I'm going to have to give up, or I'm going to have to change, or I'm going to have to stop, or I'm going to have to start, I'm going to have to change. But I kind of like that sin, it's kind of fun, and I don't want to turn loose of you. See, don't start with the excuses. Don't start with the self-justification. Don't start with the stuff that we can, kind of do. Don't start with the yeah buts. You know what those are. Well, yeah, but that's kind of crazy. That's kind of over the top, man. I mean, come on. This is 21st century America. And and I got these things, and I got these, and I think it's no big deal. It's just a bit of fun. It's just, it's nobody gets hurt. And we just don't even go there. Just go there. To live as Jesus. So go where that takes you. Even though it might require, sacrifice. We talked about in the first point. Yeah, it's worth it. Now, it's totally worth it. Because the sacrifices we make for him, as he told his disciples, they're like, man, remember his disciples said, Jesus, we left everything for you. What will there be for us? And he's like, oh, you just wait. May not be here, may not be now, but whatever you sacrifice for him, he'll repay in a way that is so unexplainably, inexplicably, undescribably beyond and above whatever you had to give up. Don't hold on to the trinkets of the world and by doing that, miss out on the unspeakably massive heavenly treasure that makes that just the true junk that it actually is. Don't buy the lie that Satan will tell you, well, okay, well, that doesn't, come on, let's not go crazy with that. No, really, go crazy with it. Go crazy with it. Okay, go all the way, go all in, go just over the top. And if the world says, man, you're kind of freaking out, man, you're kind of one of you Jesus freaks, say yes. Because we're never going to out extreme Jesus, are we? You can't do it. What he did for you is more extreme, more over the top, more radical, more all in than you could ever do for him. He's already done. Calvary, even leaving heaven to come here, become one of us. Whew. We're never going to out-extreme him, so don't worry about that. Look what he says about an unlimited submission in Romans 6. Here's what Paul writes. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone and obey him as a slave, you are a slave to the one you obey? That's kind of the definition of how slavery, servanthood works. Whether you're slaves to sin, now of course he's talking spiritually here, because it's either slaves to sin, which leads to death. So if you want to be a slave to sin, well, you can see that's where it's going to take you. So why do that? Why give yourself to the world? Why give yourself to sin? Oh, it's fun for a while. It'll overpromise and underdeliver, I guarantee you. But here's where it takes you. It leads to death. Not worth it. Or to obedience. What if you instead be a slave to obedience? Obedience to Jesus. Look what that reads. To righteousness. To being right, in a right state with God. Oh man, that's way better. No matter what it costs, no matter what it takes. Massively better. But he continues, but thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, there's your used to was, you're before Christ. What you did though, to change that, you wholeheartedly, see, all in, fully devoted, wholeheartedly obeyed the form of teaching to which you entrusted. Right there, the gospel, you obeyed it. And here's the result. You have been set free from sin. That's what Jesus does when we obey the gospel. He takes his blood, washes that sin, that stain, the spiritual cancer that kills, removes that. And now we've become slaves to righteousness. So he says now to the Romans and to us, you are slaves of righteousness if you've obeyed the gospel. So live as slaves of righteousness. Live as servants of righteousness. Submit. When you submit, what do? You basically place yourself under the authority. If somebody comes, and we've seen it in the movies where they submit to a king. We've seen that where the one comes and then here's the new king, or they come into the castle and there's the throne room and they approach the throne and they will bow, and bow the head, and basically this is not a power position. This is a humility position. And the king will grant them life or give them a job to do, but they're basically saying, I remember some books I've read, some movies I've seen, in some cultures where a defeated enemy would come, and to signify their submission to their new ruler, they would come to the king, and they would lay down at his feet, and they would take one of his feet and they would place it on his head as they're laying down there, or on the neck. And his foot is here on their neck, and they would voluntarily put that, as they lay down there, put that there, and that would signify, I give up, you win, I lose, I'm yours, you're the king, and I'm just the servant. And so there's a sense in which we as Christ people submit ourselves to him. And we become a slave of righteousness, a servant of things that are good, things that are right, things that are pure and holy and biblical. So this is what we see. This is what it is. It's all about. It's all about total commitment. Giving yourselves commitment. Commitment sometimes gets a bad word. We laugh about the guy that's kind of doesn't want to, he runs out on the wedding or doesn't want to get married because he's afraid of the C word, was afraid of commitment. Oh, not us. Let us embrace that. Let us run toward that and lean into commitment to Jesus. It's worth it. Going to cost you. Whatever it costs you. Pay it. Go there. Do that. And give yourself unreservedly, wholeheartedly to him. Don't hold back. Don't make don't write in a bunch of if clauses and escape clauses and some yeah buts in there. Just say, I am yours no matter what. Scary to do that, isn't it? But it really shouldn't be, because you think he's going to do you wrong? You think your Jesus is going to take you somewhere that's not best for you ultimately? He won't. So it's complete abandonment to Christ. Just give up you. Get past yourself, because if you're like me, my biggest obstacle to this is the guy in the mirror. My ego, my pride, my fears. My desire is to want it my way and to impose conditions on how this is going to work, Jesus. And I don't say that out loud. Don't have to. Because in here, heart's going, and that's, let's ask for help and get it from God, to get a complete abandonment to Christ, and then to have full subordination to his will. All of these things, your will be done, Jesus said to his Father. How could we say any less to our Lord? Your will be done. Period, full stop. Not, your will be done if, your will be done when no, your will be done. Exclamation point. Ooh, scary, yeah, perhaps. Best? Absolutely. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So I wonder, who among us, I know that hears this and sees this and thinks, I want to do that. I want to be that. Who among us will catch fire? I'm curious. I'm wondering. Who among us says, yes, I want to do that. I want to be that. I haven't been, and I'm gonna change. I want to help to change. I want to give myself to Jesus, because he gave himself fully to us. And he deserves nothing less than all of me. And I've been parceling out the leftovers. No longer. Who among us will catch fire and want to be totally and fully devoted to him and go where that takes you? Who? Let it be that some of us are going, all of us, many of us are going, yes, it's time to make some changes. It's time to draw a line in the sand and step across and say, right here, right now, I commit, I'm willing. And then tomorrow you recommit. And then after that you recommit. And every day you wake up, you go, let's go. You pick up your cross and we take off and follow where he leads us. No matter what that involves. That'd be awesome. That'll be a ride. Okay. It won't always be easy. It won't always be convenient. It won't always be agreed. And a lot of people will think that's insane. A lot of people will not understand that or concur with that or think you should do that. You do it anyway. You're like, okay, well, I understand. I appreciate your thoughts, but this is what I'm gonna do. Bless you. Who will do that? So this is what it means to be fully devoted. It's an unequaled sacrifice. It's an unrivaled selection. I choose him. It's an unending service. As long as I draw breath, I serve my God, and it's an unlimited submission to him as King and Master. Will you do that? Will you? Let's all make that commitment. Let's all keep that commitment today and forevermore, while together we stand and sing.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power?